Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be talking about Lovecraft and why Lovecraft scares the crap out of me, about his writing, and a selection of 5 of my favourite stories by the author. Okay everyone, just before we get going, I've had some pretty nasty flu for the last 5 days, so I haven't actually posted anything, so if I look and sound a little bit different, I'm still recovering, but I'll do the best that I can. Okay, as to that first thing, why Lovecraft scares the crap out of me, and I think why he scares the crap out of so many people out there, is because he writes about the fear of the unknown. Now I want to just read a short passage from one of the stories that may or may not be on my top 5, just to give you an idea of a theme that runs through pretty much all of Lovecraft's work. Whether it's Cthulhu, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that's okay. Whether it's that mythos or anything else that he brings up in his whole body of work and his world, but it's really about the fear of the unknown. Okay, so let's read something. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. Okay, that passage just says so much about what Lovecraft was all about and the kind of things that he spoke about in his stories, all the way from the beginning to the end, and that is that we are tiny, insignificant little ants crawling on the face of the planet Earth, and that the world, the cosmos, the universe is so much bigger than we can even give it credit for, and that there are terrors and dark gods and mad gods and drowned gods out there, that we would pretty much go mad if we even looked in their faces. And this idea of insignificance, this idea of man being alone and really having no significance whatsoever, we like ants crawling on the face of the earth, it comes through in so many of his stories, and it follows almost like a formula, that you get this narrator, you get this person telling the story from either through letters or correspondence, and that's another thing we're going to talk about. Often you get this narrator, and he, through curiosity, leaves that world of ignorance and follows down a dark path which leads to terror and madness. Okay, and before I go on, just something that I forgot to mention earlier on, and it's a well-known thing about Lovecraft the man. I'm not focusing on that here, I'm focusing on his work, on his writing, and on my favourite examples of his writing. But there are definitely trigger warnings throughout his book for racism and xenophobia and these things, so it's not for everyone. Another thing that's not for everyone is his writing and his writing style. He's a classic author, and he is completely unique in the way that he uses sentences and words, and a lot of people have called him overly descriptive and just purple prose and a terrible writer. I disagree. I think that he is brilliant at what he sets out to do, which is to terrify the reader and to tell the story. He creates an incredible amount of atmosphere and dread, and he takes the reader along for the ride into these descents into some sort of madness and sort of at the end is always this huge twist in the tale, and it leaves you kind of gasping for breath often. There's a couple of examples of the stories that I have here that really left me chilled and haunted and shaken, and he does that very well. He doesn't do it like modern authors like Stephen King or Clive Barker. He has his own style, and not everyone is going to be completely enamored with his writing. He is sometimes a bit of a challenge to get into his stories, but I think that's with a lot of classic authors. It is a challenge. It's not as easily accessible as the writing style of a lot of modern authors. It takes a little bit of a sort of a dive. It takes a little bit of a concentration. But once you get yourself immersed in his works, and you let the writing take you, find out you'll really enjoy the story. I do. Okay, next up I'd like to say that I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this author. I'm not. I have read a fair number of his stories, but since his work is now in the public domain, I have on my Kindle got the complete works of Lovecraft, and I plan to go through them at my leisure. I have read a lot that I don't enjoy, so it's not as if I'm completely crazy about this author. Some of his earlier work is not as accessible, but there are a lot of stories that I'm going to mention here that I found absolutely terrifying and worth a read. And I also think a lot of his later work is actually more accessible for readers that haven't got into him, and I'll point out the ones that I think you should try out first. There's some really excellent horror pieces in here. Finally, let's say one more thing about what Lovecraft has done. He's left a serious legacy about cosmic horror. Actually, in my reading and my research on him, I found out he did not actually invent cosmic horror, but he did reignite it, and his gods and his monsters and his elder gods, he created this world that became hugely popular and has influenced so many other authors, video games, movies, what you call the Cthulhu Mythos, or the Lovecraftian mythos, cosmic horror. And so he is an incredibly influential author. And whether you think he is a good writer or not, is really the fact that he is so influential and that people adore him and love him still today. That just says something. He's obviously a masterful storyteller, otherwise people wouldn't still be reading his stories, and I really enjoy him. Okay, so now we're going to get to the top 5. Okay, first we start with the Call of Cthulhu, number 5. And I didn't find this the most terrifying story in the world, but it is the first real glimpse at Cthulhu in all this God's glory. Actually, the first time it makes an impression. It's a short story, and I did find it very effective, and it is very influential in the whole mythos. I think Dagon was the first thing where the idea of the Cthulhu thing came into being, and this was the first time it really was realized properly. It's a story about, it's basically in 3 parts, this investigation into this voodoo cult, this very evil, crazy voodoo cult, and basically it leads to a discovery of a ship out in the ocean, that this mad god rises from the water, and people in this voodoo cult are saying to this investigator, I can't remember all the details, but basically that the god that they're worshipping is lying in slumber at the bottom of the ocean in his city, and when the stars are aligned he will rise. And that's pretty much what the story is about, and that this ship happens upon this god that is woken from its sleep. I'm not going to go into any other details. It's a great story. It's a descent into madness almost, like a lot of his stories. There's a sort of foreboding of danger, there's creepiness, there's terror with the cult, and these cults exist all over the world that worship this god. It's a great story, and it's a great introduction into the whole mythos, so give it a go. It's the Call of Cthulhu. Okay, number 4 we have something that's a lot more gothic horror than science fiction horror. Sci-fi horror is what he's more known for, or science fiction, and that is Rats in the Walls. Now, in this story, the narrator, who's a descendant of the Delapoer family, and he's American, and he travels back to England to reclaim and to restore the family estate. Now, this is to the horror of the locals who believe that it is cursed. There's a lot of folklore and belief around the fact that there were strange pagan rituals and death and madness and murder. But this guy, the narrator, moves in anyway, restores the place, and guess what? He starts to hear scrapings and rats in the walls. Funny thing is, it's only him and his cat. I'll talk about the cat in a minute. And this other person, actually no one else hears these rats in the walls. And I slowly start driving him a little bit crazy. The scratchings and the gnawings and the sounds in his head. Now, the cat's got a very unfortunate name. It's Black Cat. I'm not just going to go there. That's another trigger warning if you're going to read these stories. It pops up time and time again in his work. But it's a very effective story. It's very chilling. And then he goes to investigate. He finds in his basement that there's a secret tunnel. And really it's just a descent into utter madness and chaos. And the kind of things that he finds out about himself and about his family. And what he finds at the end of this tunnel is very disturbing, very harrowing. And it's got the most just chilling ending. I'm not going to go into any spoilers because you need to read for yourself. It's a slow burn, as most of his work is, and it normally means that you're just going at a pace and you're slowly slipping down, and it goes from like creepy to terrifying to downright horrifying, and the reveal at the end is normally quite sudden, most of his works, and just leaves you gasping for breath. And that's what I found about this story. And this is a story that terrified me the first time I read it, and I've read it a couple of times since then. And it's still just as effective. That is The Rats in the Walls. Okay, the next is another real popular one amongst readers, and that is A Colour Out of Space. Now what happens is this person goes to this town and discovers this blasted heath where nothing grows, this large stretch of land. The townspeople don't want to say anything to him, so instead he finds this man, this older man, who, and I can't remember all the names, but he basically retells the story to him of what happens. And this often happens with Lovecraft, and sometimes it puts me off just a little bit. And some of the stories I don't enjoy because of the way that it's done, but this story is very effective nonetheless. And he's told a story about this meteor that hits this family's farmhouse or farmland. And this meteor starts spilling out this colour that is non-discernible. You cannot tell it from the human eye cannot relate to it. It's unlike any colour that we know, and it starts spilling out and it starts infecting and corrupting the farmland, but not just the farmland, also the farm animals and the horses, and eventually the family themselves. And what's scary about this, I don't read a lot of science fiction, but Lovecraft is he's just so brilliant at bringing the horror of science fiction, or horror and science fiction together, that I just find this so terrifying, that this thing is utterly alien. It's not like a little green monster landing on Earth and starting shooting their gun. This is just something that is completely non-explainable, undescribable. And the fact that this family is completely at its mercy. There is nothing to be done. We are insignificant. We have nothing. If something like this happens to us, we are absolutely helpless in the face of something so alien and so different and so out there. And that's why I found the story really, really thrilling. And the ending, once again, he does endings very, very well. And it's creepy and it's terrifying, horrifying, and then it just really, really wraps up in such a devastating way. This is highly recommended, The Colour Out of Space. And I know there's a movie version of it as well, but I haven't seen that yet, and I've heard that's quite good. but I really enjoyed the story very much. Okay, now we have second place, The Whisperer in the Darkness. Now this could also easily be number one. I think the two are quite interchangeable. They both terrified the crap out of me, as I say a lot. And basically at first it's a series of letters that are exchanged between this English professor and this farmer in the hillside of Vermont. Now there's been strange goings on there. After this big flood there were things found in the water, and there's rumours of alien abductions, or the fact that if the farmers and the townsfolk get too close to a certain area they disappear. So strange rumours, and this English guy wants to know what's going on. And a series of letters exchanged between the two of them. It's actually quite effective. It does build a creepy, foreboding kind of scene, because this farm in Vermont is being, I wouldn't say haunted, but he's hearing very strange sounds at night, and things are happening to his horses or his cattle. I can't remember. I think it's horses. He's hearing whispers in the darkness, and eventually it comes to a head, and this guy is invited to go to the farm. Now, with everything that he knows, and with the second last letter that he had received, which was very creepy and really sounds a lot of danger and a foreboding of something terrible happening there, he goes anyway. And let me just interrupt quickly and say some of his protagonists make kind of foolish choices. In fact, a lot of his protagonists make foolish choices. It's the idea of going down and making choices to explore the unknown when you know it's dangerous, when you know something is there that's going to cause you harm, but you go anyway. Curiosity killed the cat, and so a lot of his protagonists take that step anyway, into the darkness, into the unknown. Well, I suppose otherwise there wouldn't be any stories, would there? But anyway, he goes to this farm, and things take a turn for the worse, and this is one of the most creepy, chilling novellas that he's written. It's so imaginative. His writing is just so imaginative. And yes, it's about space horrors and things that you wouldn't even expect in writing. Stuff that happens and stuff that he describes. I'm not going to spoil anything. But the payoff at the end is worth the whole journey. It's just, whoa. It's like, wow. Did you really write that? And in a lot of these, you get a sense of his creations, his monsters. And in this one, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. It'll leave chills. And I think for a lot of people, it's his favourite novella. It's his favourite story. That is The Whisperer in the Darkness. Okay, next up we have my number one choice, which might be a surprise for some people, and that's A Shadow over Innsmouth. Now, I don't know why, but the story really just hit me where it hurt. And it's terrifying. It's storytelling at its finest. He brings in so many of his mythos and his creatures and his gods and the drowned ones. And it tells a story of about the unknown narrator who visits a small seaside town called Innsmouth, because he hears that these people are very strange and very different, and yeah, he's exploring and he wants to know more. And he's told that because he's staying at the closest town where people basically shun these people. They're seen as outsiders because of the way they look, flattened noses, and they look almost fishy. And now this is seen by many as Lovecraft at his most, perhaps racist, other than a couple of other stories, but I just found this whole story so terrifying. Then he goes to this town, and the way that he describes the town, this town is derelict and falling apart, and just, it's so powerful. And I actually want to read just a short little paragraph to give you an idea of how he describes this town where these strange people are abiding. And this is just one small paragraph. Here and there, the ruins of wharves jutted out from the shore to end in indeterminate rottenness, those further south seeming the most decayed. And far out at sea, despite a high tide, I glimpsed a long black line, scarcely rising above the water, yet carrying a suggestion of odd latent malignancy. This I knew must be Devil Reef, As I looked, a subtle, curious sense of beckoning seemed superadded to the grim repulsion, and oddly enough I found this overtone more disturbing than the primary impression. We met no one on the road, but presently began to pass deserted farms in varying stages of ruin. Then I noticed a few inhabited houses with rags stuffed in the broken windows, and shells and dead fish lying about the littered yards. Once or twice I saw listless-looking people working in barren gardens or digging clams on the fishy-smelling beach below, and groups of dirty, simian-visaged children playing around weed-grown doorsteps. Gone like that for a while. Really a town that is very creepy, almost seems abandoned. The only people that inhabit it are very, very strange. And it seems like they've taken on some kind of fish-like quality. Look, this story builds, and it builds, and he wants to leave by nightfall, and he's unable to do so, this narrator. He can't get out of the town. He finds himself at the local hotel, and then things start to go bad for him, and this is one of the most attempted escape scenes, one of the best. It's just so exciting, so thrilling. Yeah, I really, really love this novella, and in the end things just take a turn for the worst. It's very, very unexpected ending, a very powerful ending. So I don't know, this is probably my favourite novella by Lovecraft, but maybe there's more that I haven't read yet that you can recommend. I know I've heard some good things about a couple of them. Maybe you can recommend me some in the comments below. Yeah, but that's my take on Lovecraft. Okay everyone, that's my take on Lovecraft and my top 5. I hope you enjoyed that. Apologies if I came across a little bit less keen than I usually am. I'm just recovering from flu at the moment. But yeah, please give me a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Please comment in the comment section below. And take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.